Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Painless, a conversation with myself and Welsh. I think this conversation is truly for you if you're looking to change your focus and become more of the best version of yourself or your company. My guests will be telling you just how you can achieve this. John Chappelear is an award-winning author, consultant, speaker with over 30 years experience as a C-level executive suite and entrepreneur. He's recognized internationally as an expert in individual and organization wellness. His program helps individuals reduce stress and organization become more positive and profitable. His book, The Daily Six, has been a worldwide success with individual organizations trying to become more positive and productive. His book was also awarded the Best Book Award from the US Book News. His company was built and run, and he's built and run and sold 5 companies in Washington, D.C. areas. He founded his first company at just the tender age of 30. What's truly fascinating about John is that he grew his company from a stock of just 2 to 50 with sales in excess of $15 million per year. He serves on the board of over 50 local and international organizations. More fascinating is that he's received a presidential letter of commendation for his commitment to his community. Meet my amazing guest, John, as we share his story. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. As I said in my introduction, this conversation is truly one for you. If you're looking for that way to get yourself back again, back on track, the pandemic has left so many of us lacking that focus, lacking that area where we want to go. Where is our true calling? Today's conversation is for you. Meet my amazing guest, John, who I think if you listen to my introduction, you know a lot about him by now. He'll be telling you his own journey and how he's helping you to get better. How are you, John?
Well, and first, thank you very much for having me on the program. I'm very grateful for that. It was very interesting when I found out about you and Painless Universal. It was, I'd never really thought about what I was doing relative to pain. I thought about it relative to other things, but once I began to take a look at it, I mean, when I went back and looked at my own experience, it was very painful to get from where I was to where I wanted to be. And the downside for humans is we tend to only move forward when there is pain involved. So, I've met so many people who want to try and make changes or want to try and go in a different direction, but they just can't quite make that decision until they've, what do they say? The pain of changing is finally less than the pain of staying the same. It's just so they finally will make a change and finally move forward. And I think the idea of getting back to work is hard because I'm working with a number of companies right now, and they're trying very hard to figure out how to reorganize. And honestly, for the last 10 years, I've been telling people, start having your people work from home. I mean, I sat for 30 years in Washington, D.C. traffic, driving back and forth and back and forth. And, last week we tried to talk and you were stuck in the traffic in London. And so, I mean, it's a real pain. It puts people in bad moods. It ruins productivity. When we can, now would I rather be sitting in a nice little Canadian cafe with you and having a cup of coffee and just chatting? Sure, that would be great. But I can do this now and I can go do something with my family in an hour. So do we need to have the full complement of the office like we used to have? The problem that I'm finding is that leadership doesn't have a tendency to want to grow and understand the ways in which people want to change. They just sort of, well, here was our old paradigm. Then we had COVID. and now we'd like to just reinstall the old paradigm again. And people are like, I don't really want to do that. No, thank you. No, thank you. So, I'm sure you found issues associated with that as well with the people that you deal with.
Absolutely, John. I mean, you see it everywhere. Everyone perspective of things has totally changed. The way they've seen it, they realize, actually, this actually works better for me. And actually my delivery is actually improved a lot more. So why would you want me to go back to something that I've realized actually doesn't work? But anyway, before we get started into any of that, John, I really have to ask you, who are you?
Well, I am I guess I'm a husband and a father and a grandfather first. But I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was born the fourth generation Washingtonian, and which is very unusual. Most people just sort of fly in, work for a few years and fly out. And but I was born and raised in the city, used to play in the basement of the Capitol and get chased away by the Capitol Police all the time. So I understand the DC and its workings. As a young adult, I played on the Senate softball league. So I understand the Capitol and the politics and its working. But what I did was run a business. Actually, I ran 4 businesses in Washington between the time I got out of college. I started and built them and sold them between the ages of 30 and 50. I guess those 20 years I had built 5 companies, and it was very fun and I enjoyed it very much and it was very successful, but it was not what I had hoped it to be. And this is what we were talking about earlier, which is humans tend to want to only move forward when there's pain involved. And one of those businesses caused me a great deal of pain because I had worked very hard to build it up. And the bank decided, this is way back in the previous century, back in 1991, the bank decided that it was a good idea to call my loans because I had lots of assets. And so if they called my loans, they would get repaid, versus calling other people's loans where they had no assets and they were not going to get repaid. So the people who had money, they did not work with, and the people who did not have any money, they worked with to get them through the time so that they could then call the loans and call them back in. So I went from having about 400 employees in 12 locations in 3 states to right back down to a card table and a telephone, just like it was 12 years earlier. And I said to a number of people, this kind of put a crack in my hubris and allowed a little of humility to come into the hubris. Yes. And it gratefully, over time, began to overcome the hubris and realize that, being in control and being, trying to attain this level of perfection that I always assumed I was working on attempting was nothing more than folly and never achievable, and created too much anxiety in me, which I, of course, never paid attention to, because that's how leaders are supposed to feel, right? You're supposed to be anxious and nervous and angry and frustrated and focused. And the idea of relaxing and letting things sort of come to you was way out of my comfort zone. And so it took a crash and burn like that, or crash and learn like that, to teach me to sort of look in a new direction. Because my family had supported me the entire time I was building this business, as they had in the 2 businesses before and the 2 businesses afterward. But in this one, the only people that I heard from after the bank came and took the money and everything sort of closed back down again, the only people I heard from after that was my family, who I had been putting on a back burner while I was getting this business going. Yeah. But the bankers didn't call, the Chamber of Commerce didn't call, the Rotary Club didn't call, all the little things that are so important to a business leader to be a part of and join. None of them, nobody called. So, it was just like, okay, well, now what do I do? And it does tend to, pain, it does tend to shake you a little on your foundations. And for me, my concern was this just lucky? Was I just really lucky? I mean, I built this company up to one of the divisions was the largest in the United States. So it's just, it was really big, and I was very young. It was in my mid 30s, and it was amazing. And then it was just gone. And so then it was like, well, was I just lucky, or am I really this good? And you begin to question yourself as to whether or not this is a good way to be, or should I just start over, or should I just give this all up? And what I decided was, if I was going to rebuild a business, I had to build it on a different set of principles. And instead of focusing on me, what I needed to do was sort of go find a couple of books on servant leadership and pay attention to the success of the people around me. And as I began to build the success of the people around me, my success became more and more guaranteed. You know, if I got 100 employees and they're all successful, guess who else is successful? So my focus began to change. And what I talk about in the book is changing my focus from what's in it for me, which is what I always thought before, to what's in it from me. What am I putting into my relationships? What am I putting into my organizational strengths? This is what I try to talk to leaders about today. I mean, okay, you want to bring people back in. Well, what's the value associated with that? You know, and it can't be they're employed and you give them a check. That can't be the value associated. We have to sort of get away from this, I don't even know how long, 300 years, I give you hours, you give me money kind of thing. That you need more than that one dimensional swap of time for income. People want more than that these days. And I worked in a family business when I was a kid, and my father was, I'm paying them, they're working, that's it. They don't like it, quit, I'll find somebody else. And and he spent a lot of money to send me to school to learn completely different techniques, but he would never listen to me. So that's one of the reasons I ended up in my own business.
I think your story is actually really, really insightful, because what you're talking about is that a lot of people think about this building of this business, making something successful, but what we forget that the people actually working for you are actually human beings. We forget the elements, they're human beings. And if you give them the right skill, if you give them a little bit of empathy, compassionate, even after the pandemic and you ask them to come back, they will come back because they remember that laugh you showed them. You don't even need to beg them. They always remember, that guy was so kind to me. He was a great boss and I want to come back. We always think we've come to the world where we think the world is all about money, but we forget the world, the pandemic has taught us it's more than money. There's more things to do in the world. And this leads me to your book, because I started reading your book, The Daily Six. And this is worldwide success, and for individuals, and not just for individuals, but also for organization. Can you share with me the story of how this book came about? Why did you decide to go about to write this book?
Well, I'll tell you, it started with a leadership group. I was in a program called Leadership Washington. Most major cities, I'm sure London has one, which is called, every major city in the US now has a Leadership Boston, Leadership Miami, and Leadership Washington was the first or second leadership group, and this was in the mid-'80s. And I was in that group, and about, 10 years later, after I graduated and gone on and built a company, I got asked to come back and talk about leadership and development, that kind of thing. It was right after the business, right after the story I just told you, right after that had just happened. So it's like, come on back and talk about success. And it was a pretty bad time to be asking me to do that. So I thought, well, then what I'm going to do is talk about where I'm going rather than where I've been, and why I'm going in a different path than the way I was. And so what I did was I went in and I talked about exactly what I've talked about to you, building up the company and having the bank call the loans and changing, and then rebuilding my business on a different set of principles. And I began to codify what those principles were. And they're in the book: willingness, quiet time, service, love and forgiveness, gratitude, and action. And those 6 components, to me, if I practice those on a daily basis, will do what I said earlier, which is change my focus from this to this. And so I talked about that to this group of 250 or so Washington, D.C. leaders, in my hometown. And 3 guys in this group, 2 women, by guys, I mean, it could be men or women, but 3 people came up to me at the end of the talk, 1 woman and 2 men, who had all written books. And they all said to me, almost in unison, this needs to be a book. This has to be a book. You have to get a book. Here's my agent's phone number. Here's my, kind of thing. And so I ended up with some phone numbers for agents. I can assure you that it was much easier to write the 6 concepts than it was to write a book, at least for me, because I'm definitely a talker, as you can tell. Versus a writer. A cursor blinking on a page for me is a little bit scary sometimes, but I have learned and enjoy now writing a lot more than I did in those days. But I had to find a way. For me, it was when everything sort of crashed and I was trying to rebuild my life, it had to be something that I wasn't going to treat like a gym. I wasn't like I was going to join in January and by April I was going to not be joined anymore. It had to be something that wasn't going to take an hour of my time every day, because I don't have an hour of time every day. It was something that needed to make sure that that hubris didn't resettle around my mind, and it allowed humility to sort of keep fresh air blowing through my sense of self-importance. And so the idea of starting with willingness, being willing to create changes, willing to find new teachers to teach us new lessons. If we're not willing, then nothing's going to stop. If I'm not willing to change my diet, I'm not going to lose any weight, kind of thing. It's just so to me, it was just start with that and keep it simple. So create a plan that really doesn't take any time. It just takes a change of perspective. And so willingness is a change of perspective, and willing to open up your mind and your heart and allow new teachers to put some new lessons in here. Because those old tapes, the tapes of pain, the tapes of challenges that we had and either we failed or succeeded over, are always, in my mind, are always going to be in there. And as our ability to put more positive and more productive, positive thoughts into our minds and into our psyches allows us to pull that information up when we're under stress, rather than all the old negative things that we always told ourselves. I'm not really very good at this. I don't understand how to do this. And then setting ourselves in with using quiet time, with prayer, meditation, mindfulness, whatever. I'm not trying to say this is the right way and this is the wrong way. It's just give yourself a few minutes of quiet time and create a path that allows you to set your heart and your mind in a direction that your life can follow for the day. And notice your intentions, set an intention in the quiet time, and then check back through the day as to how you're doing with your intention. I know this really sounds simple, but I can assure you that I can't tell you how many times I wrote down, be nice, or kindness is important. And by 10 o'clock, I'm ready to scream at somebody. And I look down and I notice I wrote kindness is important. And it's like, oh yeah, I think I better change the way in which I'm thinking right now, because the old behavior is just, cranks in there. And that's the big issue I have a hard time with leadership right now, is that they only have the old paradigm of how things worked before. And COVID was an emergency plan. It was like an evacuation plan for a hurricane. We evacuated all the offices, and now the hurricane's gone by, and now we're all going to go back to the offices again, and everything's just going to go back to the way it was. And we have to be willing to find past processes. And the only way that's going to happen is to change the way in which we create the planning. Because I just sent it's an article I wrote a while ago called The Seed and the Soil. And the idea is that we create tremendous amounts of time planning. All right. But the planning is always done offsite with the executive team and a couple of consultants. And then this wonderful plan comes back to the organization and gets dropped on top of the people who have to implement it. Usually without any without any notice, without any heads up, nothing at all. It's just, this is a great idea. You're going to love it. Here it is. You just have to implement it. And so what I suggest in The Seed and the Soil is the seed is the plan, and the soil is the people. And if you're not cultivating the soil, when you put the seed into the soil, it will just die. Yeah. And so if we include the people in the planning, I can't tell you how many people I've said, I walk in the morning with a woman who works for a very large financial company here. And we've talked a lot about how they're bringing people back in the office. Yeah. And I have asked her so many times, how many times, and because she's in leadership, how many times has the senior leadership sat down with you and asked you how to really design something that would keep you engaged, motivated, productive, and create some flexibility in where you're working, in the office, at home? And the answer, of course, is 0 times, and this is a very forward-thinking company. So, I ran a lot of companies in my life, and I can't imagine not having people in the office, because most of them were retail type businesses. So you need people, there to do the work. But most businesses these days are the service-based businesses, don't need human beings to physically be there. Use the technology that people don't even seem to understand. If they would just take the time to learn the technology and learn how to engage people with that. But they have to have the people engaged in the process of planning this new direction. They can't create a new direction over here and then drop it on the company. Everybody has to come together, and it's very messy. It's a very messy process, but that's what democracy and entrepreneurial living is all about. Throwing ideas against the wall and seeing what sticks. And like you said earlier, who's going to say, I loved working here. This was a wonderful place. I really want to come back here. That takes some real work. That is not the way in which you learn. You don't learn that in your MBA programs. You don't learn how to build that up in an MBA program. You only learn that by connecting emotionally with the people that you work with. And most times people feel real uncomfortable about emotional connection because it's like, well, I'm a leader. I'm not supposed to do that stuff.
Well, absolutely, John. I think you just hit the nail on the head. And the more we talk about this, what you just said, the more we probably get people understand, especially leaders, understanding that it's an incorporation. You need to incorporate everyone in this conversation rather than just the top level. And you talk a lot in your book about how to transfer this positivity to an individual and to make an impact in an organization, because I think the difficulty most organizations find themselves in is that transfer of knowledge, transfer of being positive. So how are you getting this organization to realize that the volcanoes happened, we've all been outside, now we need to come back in? How do you get now to believe that they could get people in, but they also have to change their mindset a little bit on how to incorporate that?
Well, that's a good question. The answer is it's not easy, I can assure you of that, because the only good news I have is that in the last 5 years or so, there have been a number of large international studies on engagement, connection, engagement, inclusion, and these types of things, and the levels of engagement and disengagement and how that affects the productivity, profitability, and stability of your organization. Finally, there's something that's something other than anecdotal information, because I can give you hundreds and hundreds of cases where I would go into a group and that would be just a terrible, unhealthy culture and work with them for 6 months or a year and come out of it with a wonderfully healthy culture. But that's an anecdotal story. Even though it's 5,000 employees, it's still an anecdotal story. It's not a study. It's not a white paper. But now there are finally studies that show that, what was the one I just saw the other day? 68% of the people would prefer to have a say in how and where they work. 68% of the people. And I don't know how many people have, but I guarantee it's not 68%. It's probably like 6%. So if that many people want to have a say in what they're doing or how they're doing it, for me, that needs to happen. Otherwise, you'll never rebuild. It's a whole lot more, like I said, than that one-dimensional transfer of money for time. And if you really want things to work, people have to be more engaged and feel more included, rather than this is a time where people could feel, just through the disconnect like this, people can feel left out. I mean, they're working from home, they can't get away. I mean, my web woman, except for the fact that she loves being in the middle of nowhere, lives in the middle of nowhere. I mean, she is out in the hinterlands of Canada, in northern Alberta, but that's what she likes, and she's got her own broadcast stuff for getting information out and everything. But a lot of people, are home, they've got a couple of kids and they're trying to balance their kids. They've had a couple of years of learning how to deal with their kids at home. And now it's like, well, now I got to start dealing with daycare again. How's that going to work? And if the company isn't taking those issues into consideration when they rebuild this way in which they're going to return, this great resignation that we're sort of feeling right now is not going to change much, because people are going to go, I can work for 2 different companies at home, for a few hours each day and make more money than working for one company for a longer period of time and having to drive to work. So, we need to find a way to make that happen. And what I have found is that the studies finally show that people who feel engaged and connected are much more productive. So the first thing I can do is, nowadays I can show them real studies, and that sort of at least gets them to say, okay, we'll give this a try. And the thing that I have found is that it is really not hard now. Maybe in 10 years, if people actually start doing this, it will become hard. But you can become an organizational differentiator so easily because no one is doing this. No one is including the employees. No one is asking how you would like to have this work. And the company who figures this out first is going to be like the first person that had air conditioning in the office. Everybody wants to work there because nobody else has got air conditioning. So, so now the differentiator's got to be something different. It can't be, well, we're air conditioned or we have a bathroom inside. It's got to be, we have something really different, and that is our employees are connected to the value that they contribute. They understand the value, we appreciate the value, and we respect the value, and we show them that in concrete ways, whatever that might be. And again, that's something. If I'm going to an organization,
you would definitely.
It drives me crazy that they don't think about ways to include that. I don't want to get off on tangents, but it's really important that that's how an organization success. To me, you can find simple, easy ways to make people feel successful. Small wins, moving along. And the idea here is, for me, success is the most addictive drug in the entire world because people don't know how good that feels. When somebody goes, that was a great job, really appreciate your help. Jim, the way you handled that was amazing. I've never seen anybody handle that so smoothly. How many times has anybody ever said that to you at work? So it's an easy thing to get to.
When you think about this, is there a way to measure the our productivity to make sure, like when we go to organization, are there key tips that you say to them? These are the ways to measure.
The things that, there are, of course, KPIs that can be designed, key performance indicators that can be designed for repetitive work. But the things that I try to do are turnover and absenteeism. Turnover and absenteeism, to me, indicate substantial changes in the culture. Absenteeism is high, culture is poor. Turnover is high, culture is poor. They don't want to go to work. They don't want to go to work. And then when they go to work, they don't like being at work. So the turnover churns around. And there are other people who will say, great, come on over here and work. Now, I don't think that there's very many organizations that would be out there as sort of a AAA place to draw everybody. But so people are going to go from one place to another, to another, to another. So I think there's going to be a lot of churning going on. But the idea here is that if you can pay attention to turnover and absenteeism, then you can start noticing productivity and profitability. Those are things that most organizations look at first. How's my productivity? Is it up high? Is my profitability up high? Well, those are great. But if you pay attention to absenteeism and turnover, productivity and profitability will take care of themselves. If you minimize your turnover, minimize your absenteeism, you'll have people that are, the reason they're there is because they want to be there and they want to stay there. Those people produce dramatically higher levels of whatever it is you're looking for than people who are disengaged and disconnected and use up all their sick leave or use up all their vacation and constantly moving around. It's got to be, it can't be an objective measurement. It can be, I mean, you can set up KPIs and measure. But the key ingredient for me is always going to be some sort of a subjective understanding of how the people are working and why the people are working. What am I doing to help encourage them to feel valued? Because a person who feels valued feels successful. A person who feels successful gives you the goals and directions that you want. A person who feels like they're constantly trying to swim against the stream or nobody ever listens to me or I don't understand. Those people are not, the big issue that I have, and this is something that I've heard people talk about for years, is that if you run an organization where people are not listened to, and you run an organization where people are not cared about, then what happens is the good people have a choice, and the good people will go find another job. The people who don't have a choice and are not high performers don't have a choice and will never leave. So what you'll end up with is a whole company full of poor performing people. And try to figure out what happened. I don't understand this. And it all comes back to the way in which people are treated and the way they're valued. And that's esteem and all the other issues that you can work on. But emotional intelligence, teaching emotional intelligence to leadership is really a powerful way you'd think it would be something that would be ingrained, just valuing the people who work with you.
I love that. And John, I noticed you sit on a number of boards across a various organizations. What are some of the lessons that you can share with us that you've learned from being on these various boards? Because they're quite different in different sectors. What are some of the lessons you've learned?
Well, I think the key ingredient is, for me, is that to not go in with a preconceived notion of I have the answers, so just listen to me, because that ends up being exactly the same thing as the leadership going offsite, and we set up all the answers, and I come walking in and going, here's what I can tell you, this is all the answers, just do this and everything will be great. The thing that I have learned over time is that I have to go, and when I go to an organization, the idea is to start with the top people and talk to them, because you can't get anything accomplished unless leadership buys in. But then the next thing I want to do is I want to go find the people who really make the organization run. Everybody knows there's somebody in every department who's kind of the go-to person. Maybe not the leader, but there's always the Sally or Jim who always have the answers and always know where to go. And I want to pull all those people together and start talking to them about how do we make this is where we want to go. How can we make this work? And if I go in with questions, excuse me, instead of statements, I get tremendous amount of feedback. How do you think this would work? Well, why do you think that would be valuable? How quickly could we implement this? And when it's their answers, I get no pushback on implementation. So, and last year I worked with 2 hospitals, a trucking company, and a private investment firm. And it didn't make any difference if it was a hospital, a trucking company, or a private investment firm. For me, what I work on are the people. I don't try and come in there and teach you anything about technology or teach you anything about investment planning processes, because I'm hoping that you've already been trained on that. I say that to people in workshops, that I'm not here to try and teach you to be smarter about stuff. I hope that you're here because you're already very smart about what it is you're doing. What I'm hoping to do is help you find a way to become more productive and more positive about the way in which you work and the people around you work. And so that's what I'm trying to accomplish, is finding the similarities across organizations and across enterprises. Because a large enterprise, like the hospital that I worked in, one of them was a large hospital in Saudi Arabia, and I've worked in and out of Saudi Arabia for 15 years, I guess, in different healthcare positions. And their management systems were so disconnected that if you went to the hospital warehousing process, where they were receiving glass vials and pharmaceuticals and scalpels along with beds and everything else, was a completely different mindset than the people over here who were admitting patients and were doing operations and nurses and that kind of thing. And yet the people in the warehouse saw their work as receiving boxes and putting them on shelves, and the people over here were seeing themselves as saving lives. And it wasn't until the people in the warehouse started thinking about, what I'm doing saves lives.
Yes.
The better I do this, the quicker I do this, the more efficient I do this, the quicker that the people in the hospital side get what they need to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And all of a sudden, the sense of pride, the sense of value went skyrocketed through the warehouse, just skyrocketed through the warehouse. We had people from other hospitals clamoring to come to work here, because we were the place that everybody said, this is the energy, this is the way I want my people to feel. And really, that's all it took, was a simple change of perspective. That's why I think it really is just changing the way in which we see and value the people who are around us. And really and truly, I've seen this with, especially in smaller companies where it's family businesses, where you've got a couple of children, a wife and a son and a daughter that are working for a father who still sees them as pain in the neck teenagers. And yet they both got master's degrees and they're trying to make some big changes, and the father or mother doesn't want to let them in. And it's the same kind of thing, whether it's that was the trucking company. The trucking company was a family business, and it was a second generation family business. And it was ready to become a third generation family business, but the second generation was not leaving. And it was creating tremendous amounts of problems. And so we just sort of sat down and said, well, how can we make this? We know we want to make this work. it's sort of a combination of emotional intelligence and negotiating skills, I guess is what it is. It's that way.
And when you look at it, right, for example, I know so many people watching this conversation today be thinking about, I want to be a leader. I want to be a good leader. I want to motivate my people. What do you tell someone who says, I want to be a leader, but I just don't know how to motivate my people and get the results that's needed for my organization? What kind of advice would you give someone who's going through that pain?
Well, leadership is a wonderful place to be. Not everybody's cut out for leadership. A lot of times I've advised people not to take that grade. Don't take this promotion. You're not going to like being the boss of the people that you used to work shoulder to shoulder with. It's much easier to move to a different department than it is to just get a bump up to the supervisor of the same people you used to work with. But regardless, regardless, if you want to be a good leader, what I would do is get a few simple leadership books. Max Dupree wrote a great book called The Art of Leadership. He used to run a company. I met him in the 80s. He ran Herman Miller, which is a wonderful furniture design company. And anything that Ken Blanchard wrote about 1-minute managers and simple techniques of doing things like that. But the one I would really pay attention to is, this is of course after you buy the Daily Six. That would be, without saying anything. But the one that I would really suggest that really is tangible and clear for people to try is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, or any other of Pat Lencioni's books, because he breaks things down and understands the standard dysfunctions of non-motivated teams, non-motivated leadership, non-motivated populations and organizations, and breaks it down into what are the biggest problems and what are the smallest problems, and how you sort of work your way through one to get to the other. From my standpoint, I had already been in leadership for 25 years when I wrote the book. So, now it's been 45 years. So but I can tell you that once I wrote the book and followed the plans in the book, the Daily Six book, the leadership skills that I had before became much more valuable and much more useful because they were genuine. I really cared about the people's success. I wasn't trying to make them feel like they're successful. Let's make them feel like they're successful. And that, I don't want them to feel like they're successful. I want you to know that they're successful and make them feel valued. Not act like they're valued. Let's not act like they're important. Let's make them feel like they're important. And once the genuineness comes out, and that's what the Daily Six is about, is being genuine, making a real connection. And to me, if you can connect with somebody emotionally, and you don't need to be best friends and go out on the weekends, but you can just be an emotionally connected leader within the organization. If you are able to make a person feel as if they are going to find success in working with you, you are their conduit to success as a leader. They will follow you anywhere they want to go because people want to be successful. Everybody would rather, hit a home run or, whatever the game might be, score a soccer goal, whatever it is, than miss it. Everybody would rather score than miss a score. So everybody wants to be successful. Nobody wants to do poorly at work or at home or anywhere else. So give them a clear channel that you as a leader can provide for them. You're in a position of leadership, create this conduit between yourself and them. And when you do that, they will happily follow you wherever you want them to go.
One of the things you talk about before we get to the final question is that you talk about changing your focus to productivity. If you're to give key alignments to someone who's trying to get that, but not quite sure how to really achieve those results, what kind of things would you give them in guidance to say, these are the way to prioritize them? What would you prioritize in order to get to your goals?
You're talking about tangible goals like productivity, or are you talking about emotional goals?
I'm talking about individuals and more individuals, like an individual now who's looking to achieve great results. But one of the things that we always struggle is that I don't know how to make that first step. But one of the things in your book, you always focus about changing your focus. And how do you change that mindset to get there?
Well, again, as we said at the very beginning, it really helps if you get slammed upside the head with a hammer. I mean, that will force you to change. Your focus will change very quickly when there is nothing else to do. Your changes have to come. And I tell you, it's interesting because I've worked with lots and lots of people who have gone through some very serious medical issues. And they're living a much more powerful and vibrant life because they realize that every day is a gift. And, we're kind of like, oh yeah, every day is a gift. Every day is a gift. That's, and we don't really understand what we're talking about, but people who have struggled with those issues really know what that means. And so what I do with people is say, okay, well, what do you want to accomplish? And how do you want to get there? Okay, so you do a couple of big pictures and then you begin to break those down into what do I need to do today to get one step closer? So the simple phrase is, when the goals are clear, the decisions are easy. Okay, if I know I want to get a new book written by the end of the year, okay, if I know I want to do that, then I know that it got 6 months to go, the book is going to be this many pages long, roughly, then that means I need to write this many words a day. So when I decide, somebody says, well, let's go to the beach. And I go, well, I got this many words to write. Why don't I write these words and then I'll meet you at the beach? Because I'll have something to compare it against. And so we need to call ourselves accountable and make sure that we create enough discipline, self-discipline, because that goes along with self-value. If we don't self-discipline ourselves, we will find ourselves behaving in ways that don't create a sense of self-empowerment. If we are not focusing on the goals or not focusing on ourselves mentally, spiritually, or physically, if we're not doing the things that make us healthy, then we're going to lose a lot of sense of personal self-esteem. And when that happens, our goals just go out the window. So what I would rather have people do is, if you follow the 6 components, what you'll do is you'll create a simple path for each day. And in setting that intention that you can follow for the day, at the end of the day, there's one thing that I would like people to do is to look back over the day and give themselves credit for what they did right. Because what we tend to focus on is what we really didn't do very well. Oh man, I messed that up. I didn't do this. Okay, that's all done. You can't fix that. But what did you do that really worked well? Because if we do 99% right and 1% wrong, we're always paying attention to the 1%. So what I would say to people, if you want to change your focus, start focusing on the things that you're doing right. Start realizing that success of others ensures their success. And that unless you're working completely in a vacuum, you need to make sure that the other people that you're working with are very important. The definition of love I use in the book is understanding the needs of others and treating their needs as important as my own. That's it. Just understanding their needs and treating them not more important and certainly not less important, but as important. So I'm not going to push myself over on somebody. I'm just going to continue to grow. If I don't get where I need to be today, then I'll just start back tomorrow. But if my goals are clear and my actions are moving me forward, I will feel positive about that.
That's really true. Before I let you go, John, I have to ask you, how do you find your own joy? You're a busy man, you have a family, you've learned life lessons along the way. How are you finding your own joy in all of this?
I'm looking around the room, seeing if I can find my 1-year-old puppy. He is my new running partner. It's funny, I actually at my age, all I do is walk, but I had a running partner for most of the 80s and 90s and aughts. For those 30 years, we ran almost every day. And I sent him an email of our new puppy. And I said, here's my new running partner. And it's interesting because I think I think you could solve all the world problems by giving everybody a dog. I'm sure there are non-dog people, but give them something that you can love and can love you back unconditionally. I have 5 grandchildren. I spend a lot of time on Facebook with them and Instagram pictures and FaceTiming back and forth. And they're a tremendous amount of joy. I have 2 daughters and a son. My youngest daughter just got married in Hawaii. She lives in Hawaii. She's lived there for 22 years, I guess. And, it's just paying attention this way instead of paying attention this way. I mean, it really truly is. If my focus is not me, it is amazing how easy it is to find joy. You know, the only time I get joyless and stressed out is when I'm focused this way. You know, well, how is it going to work for me? I'm not sure I can get this. Is it going to work all right? You know, it's just like, I'm still here, right? The kids all went to college. I still drive a nice car. I live in a, you know, it's like, so stop worrying about the stuff. I mean, think about something that, if you can think about whatever was driving you crazy a year ago, I'd be really impressed if you could do that. Most people can't, but as I guarantee, if you went back a year, you would be going, you know, so really and truly, my thinking is if we're focused on making sure that we're centered and balanced here, then we maximize our ability to influence what's going on out here. But we don't have any control out here. All we have is influence, and that's all based on our ability to stay centered and balanced.
Well, John, this is amazing. I really thank you for your time, and I thank you for working with my schedule when I had the traffic incident.
I appreciated you. Same with you.
I really appreciate this. Thank you so much, and I thank you so much again for the conversation. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again.